people will join slowly. Fine. So let's try to quickly recollect what we did in the last class. So we were talking about the XML version of configurations. We saw how to configure the beans using XML. Apart from that, we have gone through the auto wiring concept. Auto wiring. We saw different types of auto wiring, right? Yes. So what are the different types of auto wiring which you got here? Yes. So yes, what are the different types of auto wiring? We saw different types of auto wiring in the last class. What are they? Yeah, we saw by name, by type, and constructor. So we saw this different types of auto wiring in the last class. Yes. So and we have gone through bean scope. We got two different types of bean scopes, right? What are they? What are the different types of bean scopes which you got? Yes. What are the different types of bean scopes which you got? One is a prototype, the other one is singleton. So by default, the container follows which bean scope? By default, you'll find that the container follows singleton bean scope here. Okay, singleton bean scope. So that is the bean scope by default your container follows. We can configure prototype also, you know that. Fine. Next, we got the annotated versions of bean configurations, and especially we have used this qualifier annotation, right? So what is the purpose of this qualifier annotation? What exactly we are doing with this qualifier annotation? Qualifier annotation. So qualifier annotation is used to explicitly configure the dependency details. Yes. Okay. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to start with a new module, that is Spring JDBC. So what is the Spring JDBC? Spring JDBC, you will find that this is actually it's a wrapper around your JDBC API. It's a wrapper around your JDBC API. Yes. So why we need a wrapper around JDBC API? Because there are certain limitations for the JDBC API. So we have discussed about this limitations when we're talking about Hibernate, right? Yes. So, you know, now Spring Framework also provides this module called a Spring JDBC, which we can make use of, to address the issues related to the JDBC API. Okay. So now let's try to work with this Spring JDBC project. So I'm going to create a separate project here, okay, for the Spring JDBC to work with the Spring JDBC module. So once again, you see, you'll get a chance to see how to create a Spring project here if you have missed it earlier. So you see, under the file, you have new file, Spring project option is there. You see, you can select the Spring project wizard. Okay, now you need to specify the project name. So I'll call it as JDBC proj. Okay, I'll maximize this wizard. Now you can select this simple Spring utility project. Okay, still we'll go with this simple Spring utility project itself. Okay, yes. And here I'll click on next. It will ask us to provide this package structure which you want to follow in this project. So let's say this is the package structure which I would like to follow. comp.mtc.app. That's it. Click on finish. So now till here it's very same which we did in the last class also. That means the project which you have created earlier. So this is the same. It's not something different. Now what I'm going to do is here I will add the Maven dependencies for Spring JDBC module. Okay, so open this form.xml file. So for every module you'll have separate libraries, okay, which you need to add to this project now. So you want to work with this Spring JDBC module, so make sure that you add the libraries related to Spring JDBC module. So by default you have this the libraries which are related to Spring core module. I can say libraries in the sense, you see, we call them as dependencies here, project dependencies. Okay, basically these are all project dependencies. Yes, here now let's add the Maven dependencies for Spring JDBC. So let me do this, just a minute. Well, let me copy this first of all. So these are the two dependencies. Each dependency represents the libraries here related to that Spring JDBC. Okay, so now if we add this dependencies list here, what exactly the framework does, what do people think? Sorry, not framework in the sense the Maven tool. What exactly the Maven does here? So Maven, no. Yeah, this is what I want you people to differentiate. Um, you know, you should be able to clearly understand the difference between the Maven dependencies and the Spring dependency. So we are not talking about the Spring dependency injection concept here. So when I say Maven dependencies, that means they are nothing but the set of libraries or the jars which are needed to work with this project. Got it, all of you? Yes. Okay. So these are Maven dependencies, means the libraries. So we are not talking about the dependency injection concept which you saw in the application. So this tool, what it does now, it will make sure that it will download that libraries or jars, okay, whose details we are providing through this dependency. So dependency represents the libraries or jars, I can say. Okay, so this is Spring JDBC module libraries, and the other one here, this dependency, you know what? It's related to JDBC drivers. It's related to JDBC drivers, I can say. You know, generally, uh, if you can recollect once, So when we were working with the JDBC API, so along with JDBC API, you know that we need JDBC drivers, right? Along with JDBC API, you need JDBC drivers. And we used to explicitly download the drivers and add them to the project. That is what we used to do. But you know what? Now, here we don't need to worry about downloading that libraries here explicitly, that JDBC drivers. We don't need to explicitly download them. Okay. Instead, so the framework will take care of it. The not framework, I mean the Maven tool. So it's not related to framework. I'm sorry. So now the Maven tool itself will download that JDBC driver for MySQL. You see, we have mentioned that details. MySQL connector Java means it refers to the jar which we have earlier, which we used to add it to that JDBC projects earlier. Okay. So you see, for the first time, now we'll leave it to the tool, Maven tool. So it will download that jar, MySQL connector jar, and it will add it to the project here. Okay. Yes. So Maven will help us to manage these dependencies or libraries, I can say. That's it. Okay. So now you need to decide with which database server you want to work and the table as well. Yes. Let's see. So I would like to work with this product table. I want to work with this product table. You see, uh, first of all, what I'll do is here in this project, to represent the product records, I'm going to define a product class. Okay. So already you know that product class. It's the same old Java class here. So I'll simply add it here to this project. Okay. So let me add it to this project. You see, this is the class which I'm talking about. So now this product class represents the product records, I can say. You see, next, generally, uh, to write the data access code, we use a special component. What is it? We have a special design pattern to work with the data access code and all, right? What is it? What is the design pattern which we use to write the data access code? Forgot? My goodness, come on. So there is a popular design pattern which we have used, to work with the data access code, right? What is it? Data access object, DO. Data access objects, right? Yep. Okay. So you see, let's try to create a DO and we'll try to write that data access code. DO. Now we're going to use DO here. Okay. DO pattern is not just specific to JDBC API. Okay. So wherever you write the data access code, you can use the DO pattern. So I'll define this interface first of all, where we are going to define what methods you want that DO to implement. Okay. Let me define the interface here. So let me define the methods. So the DO, so for each DB operation, we'll have a method here, right? In this interface. So we don't even need this public, it is considered as redundant. So get product by ID. Similarly, fetching all the product records. So these are the most common DB operations which will be performing, right? Yes. Update product. Delete product. See here, Now we'll define a class which implements this interface. Okay, product do, and I'll make this class implements that interface. So in this interface, you see we have those methods which we need to implement. Yes. So I'll add all unimplemented methods. That's it. So these are the methods here. You see. Now, so we have to write the code. You see, in the add product method, we'll write the code to add a product record to the database server. So if you use JDBC API, you know what to do, how to add the product record to the database server, right? So you have to establish the connection, load the drivers, establish the connection, you know all that process. But this time I want to use Spring JDBC API. So if you use Spring JDBC API here, then what kind of support you have here? What kind of support you have here? You see? So Spring JDBC API provides a component called as JDBC template to interact with the database server. So this JDBC template here, yeah, that is what we'll see now. So we are not going to write any code to load the drivers, establish the connection. Everything will be taken care by the Spring framework. Spring framework actually what it does is it provides this template called as JDBC template. So this is from Spring framework. Okay, this is from Spring framework. Now you know this DO can use this JDBC template to interact with the database server. The DO can use this JDBC template to interact with the database server here. Okay, yes. So here, let's use this DO. Now we want to add a product record, right? So let me just add an insert query here. Insert into test.product product underscore ID. name, price, and description. Values. These are the values which you got here. So the bind parameters, we'll just set that bind parameters. Okay. So let's try to execute this query. How to execute this query? Let's say using JDBC template now. So in the JDBC template, we got a method called as update. Call this update method and pass that insert query. So the first parameter will be the insert query, and then you see next we will pass that values for this bind parameters. So we got 4 bind parameters, right? Just for each bind parameter, we'll pass a value here. Okay. So let's pass the values. You see that values are in the product object, right? So read them and pass them. So directly you can pass them. Make sure that you pass the values in this order, in which order you have specified this column names. In that order itself, you pass that values. Yep, that's it. That's all you need to do. So rest of the things we can leave it to the database. But now you need to specify the database details. Where you will specify the database details, we'll see. So you don't need to specify them here. Okay. So now, the update method, what it does is, so if it is able to successfully insert the record into the table, so it returns that 1. You see, as of now, it returns 1 if it is able to successfully insert the record. So generally, I can say that the update method returns the number of records updated as a result of executing this query. Okay, update method returns an integer value. Update method returns an integer value which indicates the number of records updated as a result of executing the query. Okay. Yes. So in this case, it should be 1. If that update method returns 1, that means the records are added successfully. The record is added successfully, not records. So you can print a message, record added successfully. Okay. We don't have any database details here, right? Now I have a question for you people. You see, now this product DO, first of all, I'm sorry. Let me configure it as a Spring Bean. I'll use component annotation and I'll assign an ID for this bean. So product DO is a bean, so which is taking the help of JDBC template to add that product record to the database server. Right? It's taking the help of JDBC template. So what is JDBC template for product DO? Can you people tell me? What is JDBC template for product DO? What is JDBC template for product DO? In terms of Spring, so what do you think? What is it? What is JDBC template for product DO? No, no, not an interface. It's a dependency, I can say. JDBC template is a dependency for product DO. JDBC template is a dependency for product DO. It's a dependency. Hope you people got it. So how will you configure the dependency details? Why we are calling it as a dependency? Because now product DO will take the help of JDBC template Product DO will take the help of JDBC template to interact with the database server, right? Okay. So how will you configure the dependency details? Auto wire annotation. Okay. Auto wire annotation. Okay. Now let's see how to configure this JDBC template. So for the first time, I can say that we are using a predefined, you know, predefined class or predefined bean class from Spring Framework. What is it? JDBC template. So let's configure this JDBC template. Okay. So I'll configure it in the XML file. Not only JDBC template, but the database details also. First of all, we'll start with database. So here, you know, you have to configure the database details through this class called as driver manager data source. And this is another predefined bean class. Just check this, please. Okay. So ID equal to data source. Next, you can give any ID you wish. Okay. Or you can call it as driver manager data source, anything. So, in this bean class, through this bean class, I can say we have to supply the database details. So property driver class name, there is a property called as driver class. Now we have to configure this org.gjd.mm.mysql.driver. So you see, this property means it's a variable defined in that class, I can say. So next you have the URL value JDBC colon MySQL colon double slash localhost colon 3306 slash test. Username, so value is root, password is root, let's say. Okay, so this way you'll configure the database details. So in this being driver manager data source, you know, will hold that database details. Next, we have to configure that JDBC template. So JDBC template is mainly responsible for interacting with the database now. Okay, so which will be used by the DO. Okay, so you see I'm configuring that JDBC template being, you know, JDBC template needs that data source details. Okay, data source reference equal to driver manager data source. That's it. So so now that means I can say that this for the JDBC template, data source is a dependency. Data source properties, it represents a dependency. So we are asking the container to supply that driver manager data source to the JDBC template. Why? Because in the driver manager data source you have that database details or data source details. Okay, yep. So you got that database details here. Fine. So now in turn, JDBC template is a dependency for the product DO. So container will supply that database JDBC template here to this product DO. So it will supply it. Yes, it will supply the details here. Yes. Yep. So we are all set. Now let's test this code. So I'll define a test class here. and we load the container. You know how to load the container, so you know what to do. Let me just write the code to load the container. Application context, new class path, XML application context. Okay, so you have to configure the details. Metainf Spring app context dot XML. Next, we'll get that bean, which bean, the product do bean. Okay, so you can also specify the type details, the class details. So let's now try to test that method, which method, add product method, which adds a product record to the database server. Okay, so here we have records till 1 to 4. I'll add 1 to 5. So I'll create a product object. One to 5. Product name, let's say M4. Okay. Mobile. Something like this. Okay. Now we got this product details. So we got this product object. In this product object, we have wrapped that product details. So what's the next thing we have to do? Call that method product do method, add product method, pass the product object reference. That's it. Okay. So if everything goes fine, so this record should be added to the database server. Okay, there's some issue. Let's see. Okay, a typo mistake. So it's product instead of T, I've typed in Y. Okay. Okay, it says record added successfully. So let's see. One to 5. So this is a record. So hope you people got it. So we are asking the container to supply this bean whose ID is product DO. Now the container will check for this bean, you see. It finds this bean. It understands that it needs a dependency. What is it? JDBC template. So what the container does, it will scan for this bean JDBC template. So which is configured in this XML file. Okay. So it is configured in this XML file. So this JDBC template in turn, it needs a dependency, that is driver manager data source, which you have configured. So the container first will instantiate this driver manager data source. Okay, it will set all those values into those properties which you have assigned. Next, it will instantiate this JDBC template bean, and it injects that dependency driver manager data source, and in turn this JDBC template, it injects it into this product DO here, and it returns a product DO reference. So that we'll take the product DO reference. So we'll create a product object, call that add product method, and pass that product object reference with it to that add product method here. Yes, that's it. Yes. Any questions in this regard? Please let me know. Okay, good. So now this is the application of dependency injection, and you see, not one more thing. We saw this JDBC module, so we are not yet done. Now I have a question for you people. So do you see any advantage for the Spring JDBC module? Yes. So did you people see any advantage of using Spring JDBC here? So it takes care of everything. Okay, good. That means you see, first of all, you will find that uh, loading of drivers, connection establishment, and all, we don't need to deal with it, right? And especially here, you see, we got the JDBC template, which helps us to interact with the database server, right? Yes, fine. Now, next thing here, let's see how to fetch the product records from the database server. Okay, let's see how to fetch the record. So for this again, I'm going to use JDBC template itself. Okay, so here, first of all, let me write this select query. Select star from test dot product where product underscore ID equal to question mark. That's it. So here in the JDBC template, now we got a method called as query for object. You know, the query for object method, it will take three parameters. Okay, yeah. Just a second, please. Just a second. Yeah, sorry. So first parameter is the query, pass at select query. The second parameter is the row mapper object reference. So what is this row mapper here? What is a row mapper? So the row mapper here, it represents that or it's an object, I can say, which helps you people to transform the record into an object. Okay, so it helps you people to transform the record into an object, I can say. Yes. So you have to implement that row mapper now. Let's try to do that. So that row mapper parameter, so which we need to pass here, you have to implement it. So that the responsibility of the row mapper is to transform that record into product object. So that code you have to write it here. So see, I'm defining a class called as product row mapper. I'll make it implements an interface called as row mapper, which is in Spring Framework. Okay. Yes. And we'll override this method called as map row. We'll override this method called as map row. Okay. And here, this map row method takes result set object and row number. You know what the framework does? Sorry, not for framework here. You got this method query for object, right? So we are executing the query. We are passing the query. It executes this query. It gets that result set object, and it will make sure that the cursor refers to that row. And then, you know, it will pass that row a result set object to this map row method, and also that row number. In this case, the row number is 1. It's negligible for us as of now. We don't need to worry about it. So now this method, what it is supposed to do is it has to read the data from the product row and store it into the product object here. Okay, set id result set dot get int product id, set name result set dot get string product name, set price result set dot get string product price, or not string, float. Next, product dot set string, sorry, set description result set dot get string of product description. Okay, so we'll return this product object reference here. That's it. So now this map row, you know, I can say that it's a dependency for that product here now. Okay, so you can configure it as a bean, row mapper. I'm sorry, product row mapper. So here I'll configure it as a dependency itself. Product row mapper. We'll use this annotation auto-wide. So the container will inject this product row mapper. Now that product row mapper reference, so you pass it to this query for object method. Query for object method. And the last parameter will be the product ID which you want to fetch. That's it. So product row mapper, I can say that it's a helper here. It is a helper, I can say. Product row mapper, I can say that it's a helper. Yes. So here, now this query for object method first executes a query. Will once it executes a query, it gets a result set object, and it takes that result set object and it will call that product row mapper method map row and passes that result set object. Map row method will create a product object, will read the data from the rows, and it returns it. It adds it to the product object and returns the product object reference. Okay, that means it is reading the data from the result set object and it is adding it to the product object here and returns that product object reference. So that query for object method will take that product object and it returns that product object reference here. Okay, you'll get the product object straight away. You're going to get the product object reference. In turn, you see this method now, it returns that product object reference. That's all you need to do. Okay, so let's test this method once. The tricky part is that row mapper here. That is what you need to understand. Okay, yes. So now what I'm going to do is I'll call that get product by ID method and we'll pass some product ID. So you're going to get the product object reference here. Okay. So product ID Let's display all these details. Product name, just a second. Price, and description. That's it. So let's run this code. So you got the product details. Okay. So hope you people got it. So any questions, let me know. So hope you people got it. Now let's do this. We'll try to implement another method here, get products. Sorry. We'll try to implement another method here, get products. So this method now will fetch all the product records from the database server, right? JDBC template dot. Now which method you have to use here? You got a method query for list. Sorry, not query for object. Query for lists. Just a second. Query method itself. Sorry, query method. So query method takes that select query. Here also you need to pass that product row mapper object reference. That's it. So you see that product row mapper, you know what it does. So it is used to transform that records, product records into product objects here. Okay. So it helps to transform that product records into product objects. Now, but here we don't have one record. So we got multiple records in this case. You have more than one record. You got multiple records. So that means, so for each row or for each record, you will find that the map row method will be called once. The map row method will be invoked once here. That's it. you know, so if you have 10 records, then the macro method will be called 10 times. So each time it returns a product object. So now, this query method will collect all the product objects. The query method will collect all the product objects and will add it to the list here. We'll add it to the list. Okay. So it returns that list of product objects. That's it. So in turn, this method can return that list. Fine. So let's test that method. So I'll call that product do method get products. So which returns list of product objects. Okay. So I'll run this code. So you got all the product records. Let me add a space in between. You see? So you'll find that it is a lot more organized here, right? It is a lot more organized, right? Hope you have noticed it. Now you see, we got that row mapper, so which helps the DO to transform that records to objects. Yeah. So any questions in this regard? Okay. Now for suppose what if you want to execute an aggregate function, what you're going to do? If you want to execute an aggregate function, what you'll do? Let's see. Let me add a method here in the interface also for that, first of all. So let's say I'm going to do this. Get max price. So this method, let's say it returns the maximum price. This method here, it's going to return the maximum price here. So that is the method we'll try to implement. Get max price. You see, we have to execute this query now. Max price query. Select max product underscore price from test.product. So JDBC template dot. Now which method we have to use here to execute this query? So in order to execute this query, so we can use query for object method itself. Now you can pass that query, and you can pass that what type of value you're expecting. You can pass the details about the type, what type of value you're expecting. So that details you can pass them. So you're going to get the price, no max price, which is float type. Okay, that price will return it here. Max price. So you can test that method also. So product name dot get max price. That's it. Shall run this code. See, you got that max price. So this way you can work with this JDBC, Spring JDBC module. Now, what are the advantages? Now you see we are able to, uh, avoid that redundant code which we write generally in using JDBC API. And you have transformation support here. And have you noticed it? There is one more difference. generally when you're writing JDBC code or when you use JDBC API, you'll be handling checked exceptions. You'll have a lot of checked exceptions, right? So you'll come across checked exceptions. But you see, you won't find those checked exceptions here. You'll not find those checked exceptions here, right? Yes. So you're not handling any exceptions. In Spring, you got a different way to handle exceptions. Okay, so we'll see that. Fine. So, and next we got declarative transaction management support also, but I'll show you people when we talk about Spring AOP module. So again, we'll come back to this Spring JDBC, or we have another option also. We'll see it in Hibernate. Both the same, declarative transaction management support. That means we don't need to write any code to manage the transactions explicitly. We saw transaction management in Hibernate, right? So, you know, the transaction management, now we can just leave it to Spring Framework. Yes, it is possible. Fine. So this is about Spring JDBC for time being now. So we'll come back to this module again when we talk about transaction management. Okay, and we'll be using it from now on frequently. So the next module which you're going to start here is Spring MVC. Okay, Spring MVC. MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. So before we start this module, we'll just take a few minutes. Okay, give me a few minutes and we'll start with this module. Okay, so just give me a few minutes, or take 5 minutes, you people also, and come back in 5 minutes and we'll continue discussion. Okay, yeah, just 5 minutes. I'll pause the meeting for 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So hope you people are back. Let's start. So now we'll talk about MVC design pattern. Sorry, Spring MVC module. So when we talk about Spring MVC module, it's basically used for developing web applications. Just a minute. Used for developing web applications. Okay. So you can think of it as struts framework. We saw struts, right? It is similar to a struts. So first of all, it is based on MVC design pattern. That is what you need to know. So we have used MVC design pattern, right? So can you people just quickly recollect this MVC design pattern? Basically, your application will be divided into three different components. Mainly, you got three different components here. What are they? Model, view, and controllers. So could you please tell me something about model components here? Yes, model components. So model components means they are any Java objects. They are any Java objects which hold business logic or which has got data access code in it, or which holds data. Which holds data. Model component is any Java object which holds data or encapsulates data access code or business logic. Yes, such objects you can call them as model components. Okay. Such objects are called as model components. Next, view components. Can you people talk about view components? View components. View components means they are mainly responsible for presenting the data. You see, I'm talking about same old MVC model, okay, MVC design pattern, which we have used earlier in Start to framework and Spring and the servlets and JSPs. It's not specific to Spring framework, okay? Yes. You see, view components, they're mainly responsible for presenting the data back to the client. They're mainly responsible for presenting the data back to the client. Can you people give me examples of view components? Which component is called as a view component? I told you people the responsibility, right? It handles presentation logic. JSPs. Okay, JSPs. JSPs are view components. Controllers. Controllers are mainly responsible for handling the request processing flow. Okay, controllers are mainly responsible for handling the request processing flow. For example, servlets. Okay, yeah. Now, you know what I'm going to do is here. I'll show you people uh, a diagram which demonstrates the request processing flow in Spring MVC So what are all the components which are involved in processing a client's request in Spring MVC? Yes, check this once. Just once, just go through it. I'll explain it. Just once check this. Yes. So, you know, here in this diagram, you'll find that you have all the components, related to Spring MVC, which are involved in processing a web client's request. So far, you see, we have developed web applications using servlets and JSPs, and we have used Struts2 framework also. But now we are going to use this Spring MVC, and let's see what are the components which are involved in processing a client's request in Spring MVC. So first of all, when the client places a request, you see which component is intercepting the request here? Dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher servlet, it's a predefined servlet. It's a servlet itself, but it is predefined. So who provides this dispatch servlet? Your Spring MVC framework. Okay, so it is from Spring framework. So it is mainly responsible for intercepting a client's request. All the client's requests will go through this dispatcher servlet, and basically here you'll find that this dispatcher servlet now which you're looking at, it is based on front controller pattern. Front controller. Front controller means this component is mainly responsible for intercepting all the client's request. Each and every client's request will go through this component called as this component servlet, dispatcher servlet, front controller, because it stands in the front, up front, and it intercepts all the requests. So that's the reason why we call it as a front controller. Okay, yes. So dispatcher servlet, it will take the request, but it's not going to process the request on its own. Instead, it will delegate the task of processing the request to the controllers. It will delegate the task of processing the request to the controllers. Okay, it will delegate the task of processing the request to the controller. So controllers, we have to develop them. You see the way we have developed servlets, and in Struts2, yes. Now this is a question for you people. In Struts2, which components did we use to process a client's request? Which components did we use? Which component did we use to process a client's request? Yes. Which components are responsible for processing a client's request in Struts2? Come on. Difficult question, huh? It starts with A. The component name, which processes a client's request, it starts with A. I'm giving you people a hint. It starts with A. Action components. In struts 2, you got something called as action components, which are responsible for processing the client's request. Here in Spring Framework, the controllers are responsible for processing the client's request. So dispatcher servlet will initially take the request, but it won't process the request on its own. Instead, it will forward the request to the controller. You know, in an application, you may have several controllers. Each controller is responsible for processing a particular type of request. Each controller is responsible for processing a particular type of request. Okay. Now, whenever a client request places a request, whenever a client places a request, dispatcher servlet will take it. And then what it does? First of all, it will find out which controller is supposed to process that request. It will find out which controller is supposed to process this client's request here. So you say dispatcher servlet, to understand which controller is supposed to process the request, it will take the help of handler mapper. Okay. It will take the help of handler mapper. So handler mapper is responsible for mapping a request to the controller. That means which client's request should be handled by which controller. That details. You see, this numbering will help you people. So dispatcher servlet will forward that action URL to the handler mapper, and the handler mapper in turn will return the details about the controller. That means the reference of that controller which is associated to that action URL which is supposed to process this client's request. This way, the dispatcher servlet will help the handler mapper. Okay. So here, now the dispatcher servlet will take that controller's reference and it will call the controller. It is going to call that controller. So the controller, when it is invoked, what it does, the controller will, the dispatcher servlet will take that controller's reference and it will call that controller and will pass that request information. It will call the controller and will pass that request information. So the controller will process the request with the help of model component here. You got model component, right? So controller will take the help of model component to process the request. Can you people give me the examples for model component? Examples of model component. It's not Spring component here. It's a general, it can be any Java object, as I told you people, which holds data or which encapsulates data access code or which holds business logic. Give me an example for model component. Yes. A DO, it's a model component. Any POJO, plain old Java object class which holds data. A Java bean, a Java bean is also a model component. Okay. Now you see the controller, once it is done processing the request, once it is done processing the request, you see it returns a model and view object. In that model and view object, you'll have the details about the response data. You see, once the request is processed, the controller may generate some response, right? That response data, you'll find it. Sorry. And even the details about the view component, which is supposed to render the response. Okay. So the name model and view itself indicates that. Model means which represents the response data. and view means the view component details. Both the details you'll have it in a model view object. You know what? Here, the dispatcher servlet, you'll find that will take that model in view object, and what it does is now it will delegate the task of rendering the response to the view component. But first of all, it should have the view component details. Okay, it should get that view component details. You know what the dispatcher servlet does is it will read the view name from that model and view object, and it will refer it to the view resolver. So what is a view resolver? It's again one of the Spring component. It's again a Spring component here. What it does is always this view resolver will take the view name and resolves a view name to a view component. It resolves a view name to the view component. Okay. Yes. So the view resolver will return that view details. That means the location of that view component and all will be written here to the dispatcher server, by whom the view resolver. This way, view resolver will help the dispatcher servlet to get that view component details. So once the dispatcher servlet gets that view component details from the view resolver, it will call that view component and will pass that response data to the view component. And in turn, it will send that response back to the client. In turn, it will send that response back to the client here. So that is how it works. Okay. This way, a client's request is processed using Spring MVC. This way, a client's request is processed using Spring MVC. Once again, I'll quickly review this. First of all, you see, the client places a request. So the dispatcher servlet will be the first component to intercept that request. And what it does here, it will read that URL, action URL, and it refers it to that handler mapper. Handler mapper now returns the details about the controller. That means controller reference which is associated to that request. So which controller is supposed to process this client's request? That controller details will be provided by the handler mapper to the dispatcher server. Dispatcher server will take the details and it will call the controller. It will call the controller. Okay. Yeah. So the controller, what it does? The controller will take that request, will take the help of model component to process that request. Once it is done processing the request, the controller returns model in view object. Controller returns a model in view object. In that model in view object, you'll have the response data as well as the view component details. So now you see the dispatches alert will read that view name from that model in view object and it refers to the view resolver. View resolver in turn will return that view component details, the location of the view, every detail about the view component will be written to whom? To the dispatch select. Dispatch select will take that view component details and it will call that view component and passes the response data. So the view component will render the response back to the client. This is how it works. Yeah. Okay. Now, hope you people got it right. Any questions in this regard, please let me know. Do you people got any questions regarding the flow? Okay, fine. Now let's do one thing. Now we'll create a Spring MVC application. Okay, and I'll demonstrate this flow. See, if you want, you can make a note of it. Now I'm going to create a web application which uses Spring MVC. Okay, so now you select this project, Spring project wizard. You can specify that name, any name you wish. A sample MVC proj, let's say. Maximize this wizard. This time you see under the templates, you select the Spring MVC project. Okay, You got Spring MVC project. You select this wizard. Okay. You select the template. So now we'll click on next, and I'll specify the package details. I'll click on finish. Okay. Now we got the Spring MVC project. First of all, let's see this structure of this MVC project. Okay, so before we move any further, so now I would like to also show people this pom.xml file. Let's see the list of dependencies which you got here. Now additional dependencies have been added. So especially this dependency is important here. MVC. Okay. Yes. So the dependency, it indicates that we want that Maven to add that MVC libraries. Okay. We are asking Maven to download that the libraries related to Spring MVC module. That is what it indicates. Okay. Now, along with it, you'll find that the APIs related to servlet JSP APIs are also added here. And what is this? The last dependency. That means it will add all the JAS libraries. Okay, it's JSTL and JUnit is also added. Fine. So the next important thing here is the web.xml file. You know, in the flow, as I told you people, you see, in Spring MVC, we got this dispatcher select. It's a predefined select. I guess we never used a predefined select so far, right? So for the first time, we're using a predefined servlet. This servlet is already defined and it is in your MVC module, Spring MVC module. So what we need to do is here, we need to add the details about that servlet class here. We need to configure that servlet. You see, this is how you'll configure the servlet. Let's take this XML version of configuring the servlet. Okay. So you see, this is the servlet class name, dispatch is servlet class name, and this is the package. You see, it takes the initialization parameter, and that value here, it refers to this XML file. Okay. Okay. Next, you see, we got servlet mapping. That means you are configuring a URL for this servlet. What is the URL here? It's slash. Slash means, yes, slash means, yeah, that means, you know, slash here it indicates that this servlet here will handle or will intercept all the client's requests. So each and every client's request which is placed by this by the clients will be intercepted by this servlet. That is what it indicates here. Okay. That is what it means. Now this initialization parameter, it refers to the configuration file, Spring Bean configuration file. You know, when it comes to web applications, we'll not write the code explicitly to load the configuration file, load the container also. Here, we have to configure the Spring Bean configuration file details this way. So that container will be loaded automatically. Here, your web application context, we call it as web application context, the container, and it will be loaded here by the dispatch server itself. Okay, fine. You know, now we can also load additional configuration files. You may have multiple configuration files. You see, in this project here, you'll find that we have couple of Spring Bean configuration files. One is servlet context.xml. This is Spring Bean configuration file. I'll explain the content in this. Okay, don't worry. And the other one is root context XML file. Why we need two configuration files and all, we'll discuss about it later. Don't worry. Okay. Yes. Now you know how to load that configuration file. Yes. Okay. Next, now you see, when it comes to web application, where we are adding the configuration file under the webin folder. Please make a note of it. Under the webin folder. Okay. We need to add the configuration file under the webin folder. You see, you got a folder with the name app servlet. The folder name can be anything. Okay, don't worry. In this folder, we have that servlet context XML file. You can use a different folder name also. Okay. Yes. You can use a different folder name also. It need not be always app servlet folder. Okay. The configuration file name also you can change it if you want. Yes. Now, this is a basic setup which you need to understand. Next, how that servlet sorry, how to create a controller, that you need to understand. Creating the controller. Okay, how to create a controller. You see, it's very easy to create a controller. It's very easy to create a controller. You see, just define a class and annotate it with @controller annotation. You'll find that by default, you know, this wizard which you have used, it has added that controller. Okay. Okay. So, you can just ignore it. If you want, you can delete it. But just, we got a sample controller. Let's see how the controller is created. Now, let me just modify this content here. Just give me a minute to modify this controller. Okay. Now, without going much into detail here, I'll just explain this controller. Anyways, we are going to create the controllers, but just a brief description. You see, in order to create a controller, all you need to do is just define a class. The class name can be anything you wish. So on top of this controller class, we'll add this annotation at the rate controller here. We'll add this annotation at the rate controller. That is what we are going to do to create a controller. Okay. Now, here in this controller, we can define a method. The name of the method can be anything you wish. The name of the method can be anything. Let's say get server time. And for this method, you have to configure a URL. Let's say the URL is server time. So this method, you can think of it as a service method here now, which is used to process the client's request. Okay. For this method, you got a URL now. What is the URL? Server time. What is the URL? Server time. Yes. This is the URL, server time. Whenever a client places a request for this URL server time, so this controllers method get server time will be called. You got it, all of you? So now for this method, controllers method, we got this URL. Yes. Here, what exactly this method is doing when it is invoked? It creates a data object based on that locale machine, that locale of that client, and you know it formats the data appropriately, and it creates a model and view object. As I told you people, you'll find that the model and view object holds that response data as well as the details about the view component, right? Yeah. Okay. So when we create this model and view object, you see, to this model and view object, you'll pass a view name. That means the JSP name, which is supposed to render the response here. Okay. The JSP name is home. And you see, to this model and view object, we are adding that formatted data. We are adding that formatted date. Okay. So the date that it's, you can think of it as a scope object here. That formatted date, you can think of it as a scope object. Okay. So it is added to the model and view object. So using the add object method, we can add the date here this way. We can add the date. Okay. And then you see it returns that model and view object. Now here we got a JSP with the name home. Where it is, I'll show you. Under the webinf, you got a folder with the name views. In that folder, we have this JSP, home JSP. Okay, what it does, this home JSP will display that date. You see, it will read that date, server time, and it displays it. That's all. Okay. Now, the thing is, the controller returns this model in view object. You see, the dispatcher select internally will take that model in view object. It reads that view name. What is it? Home. And you know what it does? It refers it to the view resolver. Where is the view resolver here? Don't worry, it might be little confusing now. Slowly you'll understand. So when we develop our own example, we'll understand. We got the view resolver configured here. This one. Just check this one. You see, here view resolver is a predefined bean. It's a predefined component. You have two properties whose values are prefix and suffix. These are the two properties, and we are assigning the values here. What are they? Webinf use and .jsp. The prefix is webinf use, suffix is .jsp. So you see, the dispatcher select when it takes its model and view object from the controller. You see, the controller returns a model and view object once it is done executing. So dispatcher select, what it does, it will take that view name. What is it? Home, and it refers it to this view resolver. So view resolver will take that view name home, and it will prefix it with that value webinf views and suffixes with .jsp here. It will suffix it with .jsp. That's it. Okay. It will suffix it with .jsp. This you see. So this becomes the location of the JSP. It becomes the location of the JSP. Yes. Okay. It becomes the location of the JSP here. So dispatcher servlet will take that location, and what it does, it will call that JSP, home JSP, and it will pass that object, you see, which is added. What is the date? To the model and view object, we have added the date, right? So the date will be passed on to that JSP. So which JSP? Home JSP. So what is that name which is given to that date? That formatted date, you see, it is added to the model and view object. What is the name given? Server type. So you see that JSP, now it will read that date here, you see, using expression language. That's all. This is how it works. So we'll try to deploy this application and we'll test it. Okay. Yes. Just a minute. Yeah. So now what is the URL of that controller? We can call the controller using the URL. What is the URL of the controller? Server type. See, using the request mapping we have configured it. Method here is get method, request method dot get. Yes, great. Still you got a lot of patience. Yes. Now let's place the request. You see what happens. I'm placing the request for that URL. Get server, sorry, server type. You see, so that controller method will be invoked. In turn, the JSP is called. That JSP, okay, it is displaying the date in that in Spanish. Don't worry, because I set the local to Spanish. My browser's local is set to Spanish. Earlier, when we are talking about struts, I did that, right? Yeah, still it is Spanish itself. Okay, so 7D November D Nombria, whatever it is. Okay, this is just an example of a controller. We got a lot of things to dig in. We'll do it. Don't worry. So what we did, is it clear for you people? Any questions? So hope you people got it right. Okay, good. I'll do one thing. I'll stop it here today. Okay. Let's meet on Monday morning again and we'll continue discussion. Monday, I'm going to take a 3 to 4 hour session. It will be a long session on Monday. Okay. So we'll meet on Monday. It is going to be a long session on Monday, 3 to 4 hours. So I'll try to complete a Spring framework in a week. Okay. Then so we'll be left over with web services. Yeah, main important framework. Yeah. Okay then. So I'll stop it here. Let's meet on Monday morning at our regular time. Okay. Thank you. I'll add this project code JDBC and Spring MVC project code to the Dropbox folder. You can go through it. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.